Hello, welcome to the Seeing Beyond Roadblocks Serving Your Entire Community breakout session. This session is going to explore our biases and rethink how we see communities as important to make sure that everyone's being represented at the conservation table. Our speakers today both come to us from the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts. Karen Buhr has served as their executive director for the past 10 years. She leads the organization and the state's 95 resource conservation districts on a range of issues, including diversity equity. The second speaker today is Kristen Murphy. She has been with the association since 2016. She manages multiple programs for them, including outreach to historically underserved producers. She serves as the agriculture program manager for the association. Thank you. I want to remind you that if you have any questions, both of the speakers are on chat and will be able to answer your questions while the presentation is running. Enjoy today's presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for being here today. We know that we all are pulled in a lot of directions. So thank you for coming and having this conversation with us today about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's been incredibly important to us, and we're really glad that you're going to be joining us on this journey and in this conversation. I'm Karen Buhr. I'm the Executive Director of CARCD, and this is...
I'm Kristen Murphy, the Agricultural Program Manager there.
And we really appreciate, again, you being here with us in this conversation. We want to really preface this by saying that we're here really to share the experience that we've been having for the last couple of years as we focused more heavily on diversity, equity, and inclusion. But we're coming here today as your colleagues who are thinking about this. We are not presenting this as experts. We certainly do not consider ourselves that. We're just here really talking about what that experience has been and sharing some of that with you, with the real hope of being on this journey with you and hopefully inspiring folks to work on this issue more fully in their own districts and their own states. So with that said, we have a really simple task for you today. The only thing that we would love to see you accomplish out of today is answer these 3 questions for yourself. And I'm going to say these. I'm going to give you just a second to think about them, and then we'll kind of move on with our presentation. But what we would love to see out of this is for you all to answer 3 questions. What are some things that you would like to start doing? So that's number 1. What would you like to start doing? What are you doing that you want to do more of? That's question number 2. And then question number 3 is, what are the things that you're doing that you'd like to do less of? So really at the end of today, if you're able to go through and answer those questions for yourself, we will feel like today was successful, and we hope that you do too. So with that said, why is this important? Why has this been important to us? And why is this important to conservation districts? Well, personally, I think that diversity, equity, and inclusion is incredibly important to conservation districts. And that's part of why we've entered into our own DEI program. And why it's important is for me really twofold. And we will in a second show you what our board's actually worked up on this. But it's really twofold. And one is that if we're going to stay relevant in this world, we're already having a lot of competition that's pushing in on us from a lot of places. And if we're going to keep that relevancy, it's incredibly important that we start to think about how we can stretch into our entire communities. That's number 1. But also number 2 is that, you know, we were created as districts that are sitting at that intersection of conservation, agriculture, and community. And if we aren't serving our entire communities, then we aren't serving our mission. And I think that it's incredibly important that we think about how we can fulfill our entire mission by serving our entire communities. So that's why I think it's important to conservation districts, and we'll bring up a few more points here in a minute. But it's also personally very strong. I have a very strong commitment to DEI. And for me, I think I have a personal commitment to that because I've really watched a lot of racism and a lot of really troubling situations happen In particular, my husband is biracial, and I've watched the things that he really struggles with on a daily basis. Everything from, facing racism and just going to the grocery store, but also in work. And what frustrates me about that is that most of the time it comes from really well-meaning people, and it comes from people that think that they're doing really good things. It comes from people who don't think that they're being racist as they're doing them, but it has really deep and meaningful impacts. And so for me personally, this is very important because I feel like we need to really step up and start to curve that tide and make this place in this world more hospitable for everyone who's walking through it. And Kristen, I will turn it over to you for your personal why.
Thanks, Karen. And thanks for sharing that with us. For me, what I go back to when I'm thinking about my why and why I want to do this work, especially in connection to agriculture and the conservation districts that I serve, that I recognize that I have a lot of resource and I have a lot of access and I have relative ease walking through my life. And because of that, it provides me with more emotional availability to be able to explore the world and to really pursue my goals without having a lot of hindrance. And I know that that's actually not everybody's experience. They don't all have the same access to resources. And then it's really about my privilege that allows me to have that. And conversely, the lack of privilege for others. So for me, my why is that I see and occasionally experience the discrepancy between marginalized and non-marginalized groups. And because I do hold substantial privilege, I find it my personal imperative to rectify the situation as best as I can. So that way everybody can have the same opportunities for success and to be able to live our lives however we want to.
Thank you, Kristen. And can you put up the slide as to what our organization has worked on the why this is important? And so this is what our organization has worked on, and this is our organizational why. And you can see in this organizational why that some of it is absolutely what I said about our mission, but we also felt it was important from our organization to talk a little bit about how conservation issues require everybody on board. And if we are excluding part of our brain trust in solving these problems, that we're really shooting ourselves short, especially when we're talking about such difficult issues as climate and some of the other issues that we're really facing. And also that we really need highly qualified staff and board, and that if we're cutting off folks because we are making our organizations not welcoming and not inclusive, that we're really losing out on some opportunities. So I think the main exercise here and what we wanted to point out is if that felt like that flowed really easily from our tongues, that was not by accident. That is because that's part of what we have embarked on. And organizational whys and personal whys are really important in this work. This issue is one that is very challenging, and it's one that is, you can argue, isn't part of the core of what we do. And because of that, it would be really easy to let that work slip to the side and become not important to us. But if we can really hold to our organizational whys, if we can say why it's important, and personally reconfirm why we think it's important, then we really stay committed to making sure that the work happens. Also, the process of putting all this together was really wonderful for our team. It was great to have our board and our staff kind of talk through all of these nuances and work on it together. And it brought us to a place where we had a shared vision of what we were looking at and a shared commitment to the work that we were doing. So that part was really important. But also, one of the things that we have faced, and I think that folks face in general when you take on a DEI challenge, particularly in the conservation world, is questioning back about, well, why is this important? We're a conservation organization. Why is this critical, or why does this matter to you? And most of the time, really, folks are just curious. They just want to know why it is that we're doing this work. And it's really important to be able to give them a really good, legitimate answer. And if we weren't able to express it quite so clearly, it makes it more difficult to express and commit to why this is so important, and to pull people that may have an interest in talking about this into the conversation. So with that said, I'm going to pass this over to Kristen to talk about the essence of this work, and what it is and what it isn't. I did want to add one more thing to that. I apologize. And that is that one other reason why this is really important is that, we have this image of what a conservation voter is, somebody who votes for conservation. And generally, when we think about people who care about the environment and conservation, the picture that pops into our head is, a white person standing on a hillside in a Carhartt or in a North Face or a Patagonia jacket, looking out over a scenic vista. And one of the things that was really influential to me as we started into our DEI process was with these statistics right here. And I think we're not getting all of them on the screen here, but basically what this is saying is that when you look across the board at all conservation issues, people of color and communities of color tend to vote more heavily towards conservation issues than white folks do. So just understanding that that commitment is there, and that maybe even in higher ratios than white folk really blows out some of those stereotypes of the reason that these folks aren't sitting in the room is that they don't care about these issues, because they do. So just wanted to kind of make that point, because for me, it was a really important one. And now I will pass it on to Kristen to talk about what this work is about and what it isn't.
Thanks, Karen. It's really interesting to see all those statistics there. So during our learning process over the last couple of years of going through this work, we've, as Karen said, I've been able to kind of suss out more of what the essence of this really is. So the first is that what it is definitely not about is that it's not about charity. It is not about seeking underserved areas and coming in uninvited and requesting to manage any part of their world. It is not about numbers and quotas. And we know, as grant-funded organizations often, that it is often important for our funders to have those kinds of numbers and demographic information. But as we go through this work on a more personal organizational level, we are creating other matrices for ourselves to be able to find out really what success is, looking at quality rather than quantity. This is not a short-term program or just an initiative. This is something that we are integrating into every aspect of our work, into every one of our programs. Although we certainly do carve out some specific time, funding, and energy for DEI, it is all-encompassing. And then it is not about hiring. Often hiring seems to be within our sphere of influence and can seem to be some low-hanging fruit on how we can make more diversity within the environmental realm. But into itself, hiring does not really alleviate the inequality and injustice that BIPOC people may face. And the last thing that this is definitely not about is changing anybody's minds. Karen and I are not here today to change any of your minds. What this is about, though, is really being able to support ourselves and others, and to collect us together into a coalition of the willing to do this work. Bringing resources to the districts, to the boards, to be able to make sure that we're able to really do an internal introspective into our organizations and find the correct niches for us to be able to continue to provide resources and technical assistance on the ground. This is definitely about creating spaces that are open and accepting of every kind of person. It is a lot of hard work, both at the organizational and at the personal level. Just like Karen went through and we talked about our own personal whys and the organizational whys. It's multifaceted in that way. It's also about being open and putting down ego and rethinking. Just remembering to be able to sit and understand better about why we feel the way we do when we have these tough discussions. It is definitely about growth and introspection and some reorganization. It is also about hearing all voices. And then the last thing I want to say about it really is that it is a long-term journey of adjusting, growing, adjusting some more, doing some more growth. This work will always continue for us as individuals, as organizations. So we'll continue to be wanting to be educated and seeking resources for ourselves. Karen, ready to move on to the decision-making cycle?
Yes. So I'm going to support what Kristen just said. I know us all in the conservation world, right? I know all of us in the conservation districts. We are doers. That's why we're here. That's why we're drawn to this work, right? There is a problem. We are going to fix it, right? That is our motto, and that's what we do. But just like we learned in all of our adaptive management cycles as we were learning our land management practices, going through school, really we have to be able to identify the right problem. And if we have blinders on to half of what the problem is, we can't get to that place in which we're solving the right problem. And so, as Kristen said, this isn't about hiring, and this isn't about making sure that you have diverse members of your board. This is really about making sure that we're asking good questions, we're figuring out what's going on within our organizations, and that we're getting to a place in which we can create the inclusive environments that pull people in. So let me just kind of show this, and then I'm going to ask you a question and see if this resonates with you. But really what we want to do is we want to take our time to gather information, look at what's happening in our organizations, look at what's happening in our communities, analyze that data, get multiple people to help us understand what we're seeing, and then we can start to kind of vision and plan and recheck those visions and plans and then move into action. Too many times our organizations, and myself included, well, let's just do some better hiring, let's just do some outreach and get some folks in, and we'll solve all those problems. But what we really have to take the time, and I have taken a lot of time to do, is really sit back and think about how we are creating the spaces that people are coming into, and making them inclusive and welcoming, and a place that folks feel like they're at home and comfortable, and that they have a voice, and that we aren't inadvertently carrying our own unintentional biases, or in any way carrying on stereotypes that we've had. And so I'm just going to ask you this because I've said it. I'll admit that I've said it. My board members have said it. I'm outing them. They've said it. I've heard people on our board say it. We invited a member of the fill in the blank community to our board, and we've asked them to come be part of our meetings, but they just stopped showing up and they stopped coming. And I don't know, we keep pulling people in to sit on our board, and then they just don't stay. You know, those are the things that we're always talking about. I'm do it too. And even now to this point, we're doing that. So rather than kind of look at that as a numbers problem, and the problem is we just don't have the right people in the seat, we really have to start thinking about this. And we're trying to think about this as, how do we make this space inclusive so that when someone does come and sit in the seat, their voice is heard, they feel like these issues that we're talking about are pertinent and appropriate to them, and that there is like a reason for folks to be in the room, and that it's an environment that people want to be part of. So whether that's on the board or whether that's on the staff. So with that, we're going to do an exercise, and I'm going to pass it over to Kristen to do that.
So we're going to take a little pause in the programming and thinking again about that kind of emotional intelligence that it's kind of like the undercurrent of what Karen and I have been talking about so far. So we are scientists and farmers and ranchers in this community, and talking about our feelings doesn't necessarily come naturally to us. But one of the things that we learned first in our equity training is that being able to tap into that emotional intelligence and about ourselves more, and how to be able to read and work with others, is really one of the foundational building blocks of being able to do some of this work. So I'm gonna show you all this nice big list of helpful feeling words. And there's a lot there. There's certainly not all of the feeling words. And we would love for you all to take a couple of minutes and think how this presentation is making you feel right now. And I know that that can be even a little bit harder than it sounds. When we first did our organizational equity training, and our trainer said, okay, everybody introduce yourselves, tell us how you're feeling today. After we went around our circle, they said, that's okay. Well, none of you used any feeling words. You all talked about the weather or how your drive here was, not how you're actually feeling sitting down with us right now. So that said, we're gonna give you all 3 minutes and just take stock of how you're feeling so far this morning and this first half of the presentation. As you all start to recognize the feelings that you have at the moment, it'd be great if you wanted to put them in the chat and share with all of us. I know that right now I'm feeling excited to be here presenting to all of you. Still nervous about it, even in this present moment, doing it. And I'm also really optimistic that we were invited here to do this presentation for you all. Karen, how are you feeling today?
Well, I am feeling a little vulnerable for sure, being out here talking about this issue in front of everyone. I'm also a little bit excited and also a little nervous, I think, as well. But also really proud that we've taken this on and proud of where we've come, and really thankful also for being asked to do the presentation. We're really excited to be here.
Okay, so I'm seeing some things trickling in here to the chat. Looks like hopeful. Connected. Great. Thank you all for sharing some with us. Karen, let's talk a little bit about what we've been doing at CARCD.
Yeah, thanks. Shake off the feeling words. It makes me uncomfortable, even though we're working through this. So yeah, I'm going to be a little more practical for all of you. Hopefully that that helps alleviate some of the feelings you were just having. For us, this work has really been focused on making sure that RCDs have the tools that they need to feel empowered to advance whatever their DEI goals are. Like Kristen said, this isn't about converting people or making people take things on. This is really just, hey, if there are resource conservation districts that want to do work in this DEI space, which we were hearing a lot of feedback on, we just want to be there to make sure that they have the tools and resources that they need. So what that's meant for us more practically is a few things. One, we recognize that in order to be able to support RCDs in doing this work, we had to be doing the work too. We needed to lead by example. So these are some of the things that we have been thinking about internally. And then we're going to talk also as we go forward about things that we've been doing for the network. But what the, and actually, can you go back a second, Kristen? Sorry. I know I was like mixing those up a little bit. But what that means really for us is that, first we started by leading with race, because most of these issues are really at their purest form in race, and then the same kind of overarching principles fall through, you know, sexism and all the other kind of isms that are there. But really, when we can look at it from the center of race, that it kind of clarifies the lens and helps us work there. We also, as I said, went really internal and started with our own board and staff. And also, as Kristen was kind of talking about, really looking at ourselves and how we are contributing to the problems both within our organization, but also societally. We also have put together some plans to think about how this can be a continued growth effort and not just this is our effort for this year. This year, it's a DEI initiative, and next year we're going to take on the monarchs. Like that. We didn't want it to feel that way. So we really have put together some plans in place to make this something that we see as a long-term commitment. We've worked with engaging our boards and our other partners that are out there that are here for us. And then also have really worked with our broader membership. And now if you'd switch to the next one, I'd appreciate it. So internally is where we started. And this is work that we have been doing over the past year. And really we started a little bit before 2019. So a little while now. And the first thing that we recognized was that it was really important for all of us to go through training so that we could really help understand where we were contributing. And so we all participated, Kristen and I, and about our board president and a few other folks had the opportunity to engage in a really long-term training. So we went through a 3-week training that happened across 3 months and are continuing now, almost 2 years, a year and a half later, to continue to go through a monthly check-in with that group of folks that we went through this training process with, and continue to do that growth with them on a monthly basis. But yeah, it was 3 weeks of very intensive training, and having that emotional intelligence and just the training on how we're contributing has been really critical to us moving forward. Once we'd gone through that training and we had all of our board and staff participate in some training, not quite as intensive as what some of us went through, but they all went through at least a 3-day training. We started a board committee to be able to keep this as a focus and to be able to identify places where we might have opportunities for growth and for participation. We also are doing DEI exercises at every board and staff meeting, so we're keeping it front and center that way. With our staff, we really just distribute out the duties. So after we went through setting some basic ground rules and talking about the definitions of the words that we were going to use, we went into a process where now every staff meeting, one of our staff members brings forward something that they've seen that really inspires them or is brought, thoughts or emotions or reactions out in them. And it can be everything from a YouTube video, or maybe they found a piece of art that was interesting, or maybe an article that really intrigued some thoughts in them. And we just have a conversation with every staff meeting about what that means to us. And then also whatever that idea is that we're talking about, how that goes into the work that we're doing and how we should be thinking about that in the work that we're doing. We also have added DEI into our strategic plan. Luckily, we were doing it already, but the board took a really big interest in making sure that that was part of our strategic plan. And while it is one of the 5 main goals that we have, it's also distributed throughout those 5 goals. So it's not like we're going to do all of this work, and our DEI work over here. We're going to do our DEI work, but we're also going to do it as part of this, and as part of this, and as part of this, so that we're making sure that it's continual throughout the work that we're doing. We've been looking for grants to support this work. So we now have, all of us have our eyes open and are looking for grants to support our work and the work of our RCDs. We also are working on a diversity statement that's better than the one we have. And then one of the really key pieces to this is partnering with our partners at NRCS and Department of Conservation. NRCS is so critical to this journey for us, and NRCS has been such a strong partner. And we really feel like they're very critical to implementing this at the local level, that we've made a huge point of spending a lot of time with the NRCS and with our conservation partners at the Department of Conservation to make sure that this is something that we're doing in tandem and in unison with them, and not something that we're doing on our own. And next slide, please. And then, as we're kind of getting our internal house in order, we are also now outreaching more to the broader community and having our RCD network engage. And part of that is that we were able to offer a training to our district managers. So our district managers who were wanting to and who wanted to be there, committed to once a month coming in and doing a 2-hour training with the folks that we went through training with as a group, and talk through this over the process of 6 months. And then we've continued that training beyond now for another 6 months. But really just giving folks the ability to join together as a community and talk about the issues and get some more training. Kristen and Kiko on our staff started an affinity group. So everyone who identifies themselves as a person of color within our network is welcome to come and join them once a month and have conversations and just have an open forum to come and talk about what it means to be a person of color in our network, and give them the space to really have conversations and bond and feel pulled in and connected and recognized in our network. We also have created a resource library, which we are absolutely going to share with you. So as we've gotten resources and as people have sent us resources, we've compiled a folder of tools that are really about a really broad diversity of topics, everything from hiring to creating inclusive spaces to anything that's in there. We've got resources, so we will definitely share those with you. Please use them, steal them, do whatever to give credit to whoever wrote them, but just take them and use them. Like, they're really there just as a gift, hoping that that folks will really engage and it'll give people inspiration. We now have had 2 conferences. So last year we did a big kickoff at our conference where our focus was primarily on race and talking about what parts of people's communities they were addressing and which parts they weren't. And then this year we had a large focus on working with tribes and with tribal folks in our community, and had a very big presence from some of the tribal entities around the state to come in and participate in conference. So everything from doing we had a tribal person do an invocation and an opening prayer. We also had a panel on how to work better with tribes, with some tribal representatives and tribal RCDs were present and presenting. And then we made a point of having a focus throughout our conference. At least every day there was a session or two, and in almost every presentation there was a perspective coming from the tribal perspective, to be able to continue the learning and the growth that we have. We've done a lot of partner outreach, and some of that partner outreach has been really important to us to happen on various levels. So we know that, like, a lot of our partners at like Audubon and Nature Conservancy and some of the other organizations that are primarily white led are all struggling with this, and we all have a commitment to this right now. So we've been able to start to reach out to those folks and pull them in and have conversations with them about, what does this mean for your organization? What are you guys working on? How can we support each other through this process? Because this is a lot of learning and a lot going on here, and we're struggling with it. So come help us. We'll help you. But also starting to think about, like, what are some of those organizations that we should be working with that we're not, and thinking about environmental justice groups, thinking about underrepresented farmer groups, thinking about those people that we're not working with, and not jumping in and just being like, hey, come on in and work with us, but thinking about really legitimate ways in which we can engage with them that don't drain their resources and pull time away from the work they're doing, but to actually augment their goals and help them in a way that is supportive and not replacing them in that work. So we've been doing a lot of thinking about that and beginning our outreach with those partners as well. And then we also thought it was incredibly important to do a celebration of all of this. So every year, it's really easy with this work, since it isn't something that you just do a checklist and check it all off and it's done. It's really important to kind of think about where we've come over the last year. And so we are holding those annually. The first one we held last year was really, the summer was just awesome, coming together and celebrating the work that we're doing. All right. So there's one last section that I want to point out here, and this is kind of our dream list. And actually, you know what, I think one thing that I forgot to mention here too is that something that also was really critical is we had a little bit of funding that we had a person in our office do a needs assessment of RCDs. So they reached out to the RCDs to get and have conversations, and many of those were done with their local NRCS district conservationist. So it was the district manager and the district conservationist sitting down and having a conversation about what are their needs in the local community and how can we better provide for those needs to help them meet their goals. And that was one of the things that came up here, that, if we get funded, because we are still looking for funding for this, we really want to support RCDs in being able to do training if they're interested and start to understand how they're contributing. We also want to help them create their own DEI plans if that's what they're interested in doing. So having a professional that can come out and work with them on a one-on-one basis. And then we also in our association would love to have a full-time staff person who can be there to make sure that our attention is still focused here, to help us with our staff meetings and keeping really interesting parts of that, but also being there so that if an RCD calls and says, hey, I've got a question about, that we can get them connected with resources, we can be a sounding board, they can just call and maybe get off their mind what they're talking, you know, get some reframing. But just having somebody who's there that's a resource and a tool both to us at CARCD and also the RCD network, and making sure that we're all able to continue to meet our goals. So we're on to lessons learned, and Kristen, I think I have been talking enough. Would you like to take over and talk a little bit about our lessons learned?
Yeah, absolutely. So with all that work that Karen just went over that we've been doing, we have learned a lot of lessons from there, and I'm sure we will continue to learn more as we go along. So not in any particular order, but I think that the most exciting lesson that we learned is that people are more ready for this than we thought. You know, as Karen mentioned, the district managers, they came together of their own volition, and folks are ready. They want to engage with us. We've been having network-wide conversations across the state, and people are showing up, and they are not always easy, and they are not always good. They're probably always good conversations, but I think sometimes Karen and I walk away, you know, wondering what just happened a little bit. But we know that all of them are good and moving forward and just having the conversations. That said, at the same point, we need to be able to meet people where they're at. We're all at very different places, and Karen and I aren't even in the same place, even though we've been having a lot of training and we've been working together on this for years now. And so we just need to be able to meet people where they are, and with compassion and open-mindedness. And that is a lesson I am still learning, but you know, it's started at least. Another is intersectionality. So, you know, we mentioned that we start and lead with race, which is, we think is important. It's a really tricky and hard conversations to be having. And other marginalized identities like gender, sexual orientation, physical ability, they kind of naturally start coming up. And starting with race has better prepared us to be able to have those other discussions. Also, speaking out is super important, and it gets easier every time you do it. Although there is a time and a place, and that is also part of that learning. We've done staff trainings, both internally at CARCD and with the conservation districts, about how to be able to approach microaggressions if and when they come up, for instance. And again, just about like meeting people, being able to do that with compassion and openness and wholeheartedness. Also, Karen mentioned that Kiko and myself are leading a affinity group for people of color, and we did not realize how necessary that was until it happened. And I think it's been a highlight of a lot of the people of color in our communities highlight and coming together and feeling stronger and better connected overall. And then the other thing that I think is super important, especially because this is an ongoing educational process for all of us, is giving ourselves permission and the grace to be able to make mistakes. I make mistakes every day with everything, but definitely in this as well. And that's okay. We're going to learn. And the most important part about it, though, is to actually learn from the mistakes, but then also tending to any impacts that may have been negatively or made and had some negative impact that you may or may not have did not intend to be there. So in some of the agreements that we have in our team is that we want to be able to tend to our impacts of the mistakes that we made, but we're going to do that with positive feelings and wholeheartedness together so that we all learn together. Karen, what are lessons that you've learned?
Oof. A lot. As you mentioned, this has not been an easy road. It has most definitely been rocky. And I have definitely made my share of mistakes and learned my share of lessons. I hope they continue. And I think a couple of things that, one, I did not realize how emotional this was going to be, and how much of this was going to be based in really kind of, as Kristen was saying, like figuring out what my emotions are and how I'm bringing that into places. But I feel like from that experience, it's really made me a healthier person all around, not just in this DEI space, but really all around. It's been incredibly important to me, and it was definitely worth all of the difficult parts that we've been through. And I know that there are more in front of us, a lot more in front of us. So while it's hard, I am looking forward to the things that I haven't learned yet. Also, this is a really long-term process. Like I was saying at the beginning, this isn't about, okay, we're going to do it, this is our year initiative, but really that this is a commitment that we have to make every day, and that we have to make long-term. And for our organization, we've really taken on this effort, and it's going to be a long process. One thing too is again, being goal oriented and being a doer, and goals have always been the thing that I was like, all right, we're going to do this, and we're going to make it, and we're going to check these boxes. But really understanding that, for me, understanding that it's not the goals that are important, but it's the commitment to the process. So we're not looking at the outcome and checking off the boxes of the outcome, but it's really about making that deep commitment to the process and being present for it and hanging with it even when it gets hard, because we've had some very rocky moments over the last couple of years. But being able to show up for each other and not giving up on the fact that this is important, just because the road gets rocky. And so really keeping focused on that process and not those goals and objectives has been really, really important, and something that was very uncomfortable for me. Very uncomfortable for me. Also, that training is really important, that we don't have the capability of doing the work that we need to do without going through a process of understanding our impact. And so I think that training is incredibly important, but not just training that, I don't think every training works. I don't think, I don't think that at all. But I think really having that training that does address this from the personal and starting at that individual impact is really, really important in understanding our ability to change the situation that's around us, and how we are the ones that are taking accountability for what we are responsible for and what we're accountable for in our immediate space, and knowing where that line ends of what we're accountable for and what we're not has been incredibly helpful. And training has been really key to that. And then the last thing I'll say is that NRCS is just such an important tool. And after we went through our needs assessment, and after we've kind of talked with all of our partners, I really understand that NRCS, not only are they light years ahead of us on this and have been working on this issue for a lot longer, but they're such a critical part of certainly our partnership at the statewide level. Their family, like we couldn't do any of the work we do without them. But also at the local level, it is the district manager and the district conservationists that are doing this work in lockstep. And so just like any family issue, we can't address these issues without being in lockstep with the NRCS. In addition to like just that partnership and how important they are to us relationally, they also have tools, resources, trainings. They have so much available that without their support there and their support to our local communities and to us at the state level, this work can't be done. So NRCS is really, really important. And then Kristen, do you want to talk about some of these tools? Oh, actually, I'll go through these. I think most of these things we've already said. So really what I would be doing if I was to read all of these to you, and I probably will, is just to kind of reiterate the things we've already said. But I know Kristen and I have gone over an incredible amount of information in the last few minutes here. And I know that we kind of covered a lot of topics that were kind of all tangential, but very different topics. So I do want to just re-emphasize these tools that are out here. And One of them is that we were really fortunate to work with CDE, the Center for Diversity and the Environment, and they put all of their training through an environmental or conservation lens. And that was really helpful because they were able to speak to us in the language that we speak, which is conservation and is science, and also just really help us through understanding our community with a really special focus. And that was really important. And actually, I want to say too that so much of our presentation today and all the tools and resources that you're seeing here are all credited to them, but I want to give them a special thank you for the work they've done and for the tools that are here that are largely theirs that we're presenting. So Center for Diversity and the Environment is awesome, but finding some trainers that do have a special conservation background and understand the world we walk in is really important. Also, there is so much out there. It's not like we're reinventing the wheel and we're the first people to ever think about this, right? This conversation's been going on for a long time. So if you feel like there aren't resources, not only are we going to share what we've compiled, but just quick searches, find organizations and YouTube videos and articles, and I mean, really the information is almost endless what's out there. So we really encourage folks to spend some time even just like reading through free tools, because there's a lot of great stuff. And then again, I think like-minded partners are really important to this walk, and Rcds obviously. But as I mentioned before, just finding the other folks for us has been really important, like finding Point Blue Conservation, Point Blue, I got their name wrong, Point Blue and Audubon and TNC, and being able to connect with those folks and have conversations with them about what they're doing has been really, really critical.
So we're coming to the end of our presentation here, and I want to circle back to what Karen brought up at the very beginning of this, and the 3 different questions that we wanted you to keep in mind as we went through this. So we're actually going to end now, taking a little bit more time for all of you, 5 minutes or so, to think about this. What do you want to start doing? What are you doing that you want to continue? And what is it that you need to do less of, particularly with the framing of this diversity, equity, and inclusion? And I have mine actually right here. This, as Karen mentioned, was one of the tools that we did together through our own training. And I would be happy to share to give you all an example. So for me, I wanted to start bringing in diverse communities that we don't naturally reach. I want to continue being noisy to Karen to incorporate the equity focus into all of our programs, and to continue learning and exploring how best to be an ally and appropriately engage. And then I want to stop or do less of being too rushed to hear all of the voices and holding myself only to normative patriarchal values. So those are the 3 things that I've been focusing on. And it's kind of on my mind often, those 3 things, and adding more to them. So I'm gonna be quiet for a minute and give you all the space to do that.
Well, fantastic. We won't make you share those in the chat. Those are all there for you. We really thank you again for joining us today, and also for inviting us here to have this conversation. We're just really excited to have it. It's obviously something that's really meaningful to us. And we're really excited that you took the time to be here and listen to this today, and to put your mind on the importance of DEI work. And we are excited that you are interested in part of this journey with us, and however you would like us to engage with that. We are always looking for folks to talk with about this. So we'd love to be drawn into a conversation. And we'd love to hear what's working in other states, and what you guys have been working on, because we would really love to continue our learning process. So thank you for being here. Thank you for inviting us. And we hope that you have a really wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies. That was a fascinating presentation, and it certainly gave me a lot to think about. For everyone that has participated, thank you for joining us. I want to remind you to go back to the agenda and look at the next presentation that you want to watch. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.